The sun was melting behind the golden hills of Montana, turning the dust on the road into a trail of soft fire. The old ranch house stood quietly against the horizon, its wooden walls carrying stories of time, wind, and waiting hearts. Inside, a man sat by the window, his hat tilted low, his heart heavier than the saddle he'd dropped by the door. His name was Clay Dalton, a cowboy who had fought too many storms and buried too many dreams. He wasn't the kind of man who believed in love anymore, but fate had other plans. He had sent word months ago to the shelter in Texas, a place where forgotten women waited for second chances, asking for a bride. Not because he was desperate, but because the ranch was too quiet, too cold, and too full of echoes. The kind that creep into a man's bones when he's got no one to talk to but the wind. He had only one request, someone kind, someone gentle, someone who could fill the silence with laughter. That evening, as the orange sky faded to violet, a carriage stopped by the old gate. Clay stepped out, the crunch of gravel under his boots breaking the stillness. The driver tipped his hat and pointed toward the woman sitting inside. Clay's breath caught for a moment. She wasn't what he'd imagined. Her dress was plain, her hands trembled slightly as she held a small bag, and her eyes, though tired, carried a quiet fire, the kind that spoke of survival. When she stepped down, she looked at him once, then lowered her gaze. Her voice was soft but steady. "I'm not the pretty one you ordered," she said, her lips curling into a half-apologetic smile. "They sent me instead." For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy, uncertain, almost painful. The wind brushed her hair across her face, and Clay noticed the way her eyes glimmered, not with beauty, but with truth. He took a slow breath, lifted his hat, and smiled the way a man smiles when his heart remembers how to feel again. "You're all I needed," he said simply. The world seemed to pause there, in that dusty space between two broken souls finding a reason to start again. Inside the ranch, the warmth of the fireplace danced across her face as she looked around the old wooden walls. There were faded photographs, worn saddles, and a rocking chair that creaked like an old song. Clay watched her quietly, noticing how carefully she moved, as if afraid she might break something. She wasn't used to belonging anywhere. Her name was Lydia, and life hadn't been kind to her. The shelter was the only place that had taken her in when everyone else had turned away. She didn't come from money, nor from love. Just courage, the kind you find when you've lost everything else. That night, Clay made them coffee. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm. They sat across from each other, the crackling of the fire filling the silence. "You didn't expect me, did you?" she said finally. He looked up. "I didn't expect anyone to come." Her eyes softened. "And now that I'm here." Clay leaned back, studying her like a sunset he didn't want to end. "Now, the house doesn't feel empty anymore." Something inside Lydia shifted. For years she had built walls around her heart, believing no one would ever look at her the way he just did. The way that said, "You matter." Outside, the wind sang through the cottonwoods. Inside, two lonely souls began to find rhythm in each other's quiet. Clay showed her the ranch, the horses, and the small stream that ran behind the barn. Lydia listened, her fingers brushing against the rough wood, her eyes slowly softening to the peace she'd never known before. But not everything was easy. The next morning, when Clay's neighbor stopped by, he gave Lydia a long look, the kind that burns with judgment. "So this is your bride from the shelter," he said with a half-smirk. Clay didn't flinch. "She's my wife," he answered, his voice calm but firm. Lydia felt her throat tighten, she wasn't used to anyone standing up for her. Later that day, when they were alone, she whispered, "You didn't have to defend me." Clay smiled. "Lydia, I didn't defend you. I just told the truth." And for the first time in her life, Lydia believed it, that maybe she was enough. As the days passed, the ranch began to breathe again. Lydia's laughter returned with the dawn. She started tending the flowers near the porch, cooking meals that reminded Clay of the home he'd lost long ago. He, in turn, taught her how to ride, how to hold the reins without fear. The two of them began to stitch something beautiful from the torn fabric of their pasts. Every sunset found them side by side, sitting on the porch, sipping coffee, saying little but feeling everything. One evening, as the golden light fell over the land, Lydia turned to him and said, "Do you ever think about the woman you were supposed to get?" Clay smiled softly. "I do. But then I remember she didn't come. You did. And maybe, that was the best thing that ever happened to me." Lydia blinked back tears, her heart swelling in ways she hadn't felt in years. She had come to the ranch believing she was unwanted, unseen, and unlovable, but here she was, being loved not for her beauty, but for her soul. And as the camera of life panned out over the ranch, the light fading, the music swelling, a voice, soft and full of hope, could be heard. Sometimes love doesn't come in the package we expect. But when it finds us, it heals everything. Clay turned to Lydia and whispered, "You saved me without even trying." She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Maybe we both did." And right there, under the fading light of another Montana sunset, two hearts that had forgotten how to dream found their way home.